Hi, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda, and this is the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast.
This podcast is all about taking action and creating that badass business abundance and life that you want.
Where we share stories, laughs, wins, and epic fails to show you the whole picture of the entrepreneurial journey.
It's not just unicorns and rainbows, people.
Jump on and follow us through this raw and witty roller coaster,
where we get down and dirty and go behind the scenes of life and entrepreneurship.
Get on it,
get over it,
and get after it.
Hey, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to the Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. We are back again, and we have another exciting guest to share with you. This is Tim Noetzel. He is a web developer, designer, and the founder of freelancegps.com, where he coaches on how to start and grow successful freelance businesses. We've never had a freelancer, so we're really excited to have him on the show. He grew his solo freelance business from $0 in 2019 to a 480,000 year business today. We are super excited to have you on, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
So how did you get started in this freelance world?
Yeah, so ironically, my freelance journey actually started with a job search. I have been working in startups pretty much my whole career, which obviously are pretty volatile. And so I found myself looking for a job in 2019, and I really just wasn't finding anything I was excited about. And I was talking to my wife, who's my fiance at the time, and she was like, why don't you just freelance? You've done freelancing on and off as side projects. Why don't you just do it full time? And, I was really excited about that just because I knew what doing that full time could mean in terms of, schedule flexibility and, the ability to work when, where I wanted, all of that kind of stuff. But I was also in the middle of saving for a wedding and buying a house. So I knew if I was going to make that work, I needed to figure something out pretty quickly. And that, I think, more than anything else, was intimidating at the time, and really meant that I was going to have to find a way to find clients that really could cut through the noise and was substantially more efficient than most of the other things that people try. Freelance websites, social media, blogging, that kind of thing.
I love that.
I love that you started pre-COVID. Yeah. I think that's an important distinction. I know I'm not like bashing on people who started post-COVID. However, there has been such an influx of freelance work done out of necessity or out of just passive income, like desiring to change something in what they're doing. But COVID really created an insurgence of this. And I appreciate that you had almost like foresight to start it earlier to work.
I was going to say the same thing, that it's really awesome. Amanda and I talk a lot about like the COVID coaches and like the COVID freelancers, which that's not throwing shade at them. We love people though that like started prior and actually built your business during where most people were a bit like not spending as much and kind of a bit skittish because we didn't know what was next.
Yeah, I think I found ironically that COVID was actually really good for my business. I think a lot of businesses, particularly in the tech and econ world where I operate, were struggling to do more with less. And, that meant turning to freelancers for support and for help. Oftentimes they were shrinking the size of their teams or choosing to spend their money in different ways than they had been previously. And so I really saw my business kind of take off. And I think a lot of other freelancers did as well.
Yeah, I would agree. You talk about that you really use what Amanda and I love, the one-to-one conversations and referrals and actually building relationships. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because to me, it is a pivotal part of our business and something that I teach a lot around. Amanda teaches a lot around. We coach a lot around, but I love finding another person who has done the same.
Yeah, I think, ultimately, I think when you're thinking about how to grow any business, you're looking at marketing channels, right? And comparing them. And I think it's helpful to look at them on kind of two different spectrums. One of them is just, how crowded is that channel? Right. And you can look at, in freelancing, you can look at freelance websites or blogging or social media, and you see that they're extremely crowded, right? Anybody can join a site like Upwork, which means everybody does. That means the average gig gets like 50 plus proposals. The average price for a web development gig on a site like Upwork in the US is just $20 an hour. So, if you want to build a successful, scalable business, that's just not a recipe for success, right? You can do a similar comparison on something like, for something like social media or blogging, where, you're effectively out there competing with every other marketer on the internet for your client's attention. So it becomes really challenging, right? The other spectrum I think that's useful to look at is just how crowded a channel is, and based on that, how much time, money, and effort you need to spend on an ongoing basis and upfront to get that channel to work. Right, blogging takes 6+ months to get any kind of traction. You guys know how much effort it takes to get a podcast off the ground. Right. And a lot of those are, common recommendations for freelancers. Hey, you should go try these things. And I don't want to say that they don't work, because they definitely do to some extent, but it's tons and tons of effort to get those off the ground. And what I found was one-on-one conversations really just cut through the noise substantially faster, because people like to buy from those that they trust, people that they know. And so if you can build good rapport with clients, if you can, identify the sort of hubs in your area and online where your clients are hanging out and go and participate, it becomes substantially easier to connect with clients, build relationships and ultimately sell projects.
I love that. I was literally talking with someone today about starting freelance work, and I think that you're right, that one of the big misconceptions I think a lot of people have about, I think across all businesses and across, I think the freelance sphere, it's definitely prevalent in our all industries, of like, if I just start Upwork or just start a Fiverr account, I'll make $200,000 this year in my freelance world. And that's a great aspiration. And I definitely feel like you shouldn't poo-poo people's dreams. However, there's more to it than just, because it is a lot of things to filter through and to sift through. So having that one-on-one personal connection does filter through that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think long gone are the business days of, if you build it, they will come, right? You really have to start out with a plan, and know how you're going to reach folks. And I think any sort of advantage you can get is huge, but there's a few of those sort of, I don't know, thought leaders, if you will, out there, saying, oh yeah, you can make, hundreds of thousands of dollars on Upwork. And, I certainly it's possible, but it is not in any way the norm, for, the vast majority of people using that platform, right? You don't get to 200K plus with, $20 an hour gigs. You just don't. And so if you're serious about it, I really recommend having a plan that relies on, ultimately owning your own sales and marketing machine rather than kind of outsourcing it to somebody else.
Yeah, it seems like more recently, because I think because of the coaching consulting influx during COVID, they're becoming a lot more popularized hubs, kind of like Upwork and Fiverr, for coaches and consultants. And I used to run an organization that there were hundreds of them, and they would like join these groups, and I'd say, no, like if you actually work the system, you can make more money and have, like you said, have the ownership of your sales funnel and the client process. So I love that. I do want to come back to, though, because I can hear our audience saying, okay, you're having conversations and building relationships, but where do you find these people? So how do you maintain a steady stream on and offline of one-on-one conversations and referrals to grow your business?
Yeah, great question. I think there's two really key points here. One of them is just identifying the places where your ideal clients are hanging out, both online and in the real world, right? So, for me, that's startup accelerators and co-working spaces and industry meetups and industry groups. Online Slack groups based around the industry as well are really, really good. And so going to those places and participating in one way or another is extremely helpful, right? So if you're new, that can be as simple as going and asking for some advice, right? Saying, "Hey, I'm starting a freelance business. I'd love to just pick your brain and hear about experiences you've had with other freelancers. What's gone well, what hasn't gone well." Is a really disarming way, frankly, to start some of those conversations. And the nice thing about that kind of approach is you don't have to pitch, right? If people have work for you, they'll kind of just raise their hand and say, "Hey, we should talk about this project." And if not, you can build a relationship, ask for introductions to other folks who might be willing to give some advice, and kind of keep that process going of having one-on-one conversations until you do find some projects. The other thing that I think is really helpful is thinking about who already knows your ideal clients and could potentially introduce you. Oftentimes, the best source for new freelancers is actually other freelancers, particularly those who work in sort of complementary fields, right? So if you're a web developer, talk to designers and marketers, right? Because they are already working with your ideal clients. They also don't do what you do, so they're not competitive. They'll be willing to introduce you. And the nice thing is they're also the people that your clients ask first when they're looking for somebody like you. So those are two of the ways that I found that work really, really well. And typically the folks that I coach on this sort of approach find, somewhere between 5 and 15 conversations, they've got a new project. So it's extremely efficient, right? It's the kind of thing you can do in a couple of hours a week. And you compare that to something like Upwork, where the so-called expert advice is you should be submitting 25 to 50 proposals a week, right? I don't know anybody who can do that and have them be any kind of quality in like under 20 or 30 hours a week. It's just far and away more effective. You spend way less time, which means you can keep doing it while you're working. And then you don't have those peaks and valleys in your business either.
Yes. And like Lynn and I talk about this a lot and I want to point this out in case anybody missed it from what you just said, finding somebody in a complementary business. So it's not a direct competitor, but you work well together and you will complement each other and refer business to each other seamlessly. And I think that is such an underutilized resource to find somebody in a complementary business. I would, call it power teams, whatever you want to call it. But that is gold when you're looking to build relationships and find clients without having to do so much work.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any way that you can find to partner with folks works really, really well. Other freelancers are an obvious one, but a lot of times co-working spaces and accelerators like other industry groups are looking for content. So that's another great way to get in front of your ideal clients. There's just so many opportunities out there to find, really like kind of symbiotic little relationships that you can use to grow your business.
Absolutely. And I don't know if, because you didn't flat out say it, but you're speaking about it, is one of the other things that has to be absolutely essential to you building your business and others who are successful is that you are going out there and being proactive. And I think back to how we found each other. You actually slid into our email. Like you said, "Hey, like I saw your podcast. I think it might be a good fit. Would you be open to it?" And most people don't email us directly. Most people don't put in the action to like go where the people might be. Going back to what you were saying, a lot of people have the ideology that if you build it, they will come, but they're not putting in the action. And I love that. I love that you're talking about it, even though you didn't flat out say like, "I'm putting in the work." So I do want to ask around that, because one thing that we get a lot of from our clients is like, how do you stay motivated to put in that work, to keep going over and over and over again and putting yourself out there? Because it sounds like that is a key aspect of what you did and what you continue to do.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I'm glad you asked that question, because I think it highlights kind of two different points that are important here. One of them is just like who this kind of an approach can work for. And I think when a lot of people think about either marketing or networking, right, they think of people who are extremely extroverted. But the irony is the vast majority of freelancers aren't. I'm certainly not. I definitely am a born introvert. If I go to a party, I need to go home and recharge afterwards. But the nice thing about this approach is that you can kind of do it on your terms, right? You find folks who you think would be a good fit, prep something, and then go have the conversation, right? And so I think it's a much more approachable way to grow your business than something like just showing up to a networking event and kind of trying to work the room. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Lynn, when you were mentioning that you really have to put the time and the effort in. That's going to be true of any marketing you do, right? Ultimately, any kind of marketing is going to be a numbers game. Some people will say no, or it won't be a good fit. But I think that the nice thing about this is the odds are way more in your favor than just about anything else, right? Face-to-face conversations work substantially better than banner ads, right? We all know that implicitly, right? And the nice thing is that you can adjust as you go, right? In the middle of a conversation, you can change your approach if you see it's not going well. People also are just predisposed to be helpful to people who are kind of in their circle or in the same community. That is something that has been studied in like psychological circles for a very, very long time. And you see that when you go and chat with people in a local community, but also even in an online community, right? Like small business owners like to help each other out. And so it was, for me, a pretty easy ask to say, hey, can I be on the podcast? Because I knew I wasn't going to be laughed out of the room, right? Either you'd say yes or you'd say no, but it wasn't like, way out of left field or anything like that, right? And I think the same is true for, web developers, designers, writers, other tech people, and the people that they work with.
Absolutely. Yeah, we would never laugh at you, Tim. We would never laugh at anybody.
Oh, you probably should laugh at me, but maybe not for that request.
So tell me, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges that you have faced in building your freelance career?
Yeah, so I think, beyond meeting clients, I think probably the most important thing is meeting the right clients. And I have found far and away the thing that has helped me grow, and also the thing that separates successful freelancers in general from those who kind of struggle, is client quality. And I think at the beginning, I really struggled with clients who really just didn't operate the way I needed them to have a successful business. And I think, as freelancers, right, we tend to think about that in the opposite way, right? Like, what do I need to do, to make this client happy? And you definitely need to be thinking about that. But I think ultimately it needs to be sort of a two-way street, right? And so, you are effectively looking for clients who can afford to pay premium rates, who are willing to pay premium rates, who ask smart questions, who give good feedback, who are easy to sell to, who, refer business your way, all of those kinds of things. And the reality is that not all clients are created equal, right? Some clients do all of those things. And when you're working with them, freelancing really is kind of a joy. It's some of the most fun I've ever had in my career. But when you're working with clients who are constantly changing the scope last minute, who are making decisions in sort of an arbitrary and capricious sort of way, who require tons of hand-holding, life becomes a grind. And I think when you look at freelancers who are struggling, almost universally, the reason that they're struggling is because they're working with, more of those types of clients who really just aren't, kind of top tier. And so I think, ultimately, what I had to do was really narrow down on who those ideal clients were, and make sure that, everything in my positioning and in my marketing and how I was having conversations was sort of positioning me to attract more of them and to repel clients who maybe weren't kind of the best fit.
Speaking our love language, I do want to clarify one thing, top tier to the individual, because we're not everybody's cup of tea.
Absolutely.
And I know you kind of said that. I'm not saying clarify for you, but like for the audience, because there are lots of little nuggets in there that, I mean, you really were speaking. Man and I have this conversation all the time, not just with our clients, but with each other. And I love that you spoke about a couple of things. One is like, yeah, it needs to be the right fit for both, right? And so, and if not, then you're going to struggle and you're going to have that like, I just met a new person. I'm going to meet with him because he's a very high level individual here in Thailand. And his text messages, I sent one to Amanda yesterday. I'm like, oh, this is going to be painful just because he communicates in a very different behavioral style than I do. However, I'm not looking to have him as a client. He will never be a client because I already see the red flags. It's more for like connections, right? And so I think that that's really important to identify. The other thing, though, that you said in the beginning, and I love it, and I want you to kind of talk a little bit more about this because I know that this is a mistake that a lot of freelancers do, and business owners, period, is they say, I'm not selling, or this person gave me this feedback, so I need to drop my prices. I need to do this. I need to bend and bow at everybody's like whim and woes. And you said, you were talking about that earlier in this last little clip. So I want you to talk a little bit about, I know that's a common mistake that they use, and like, how have you walked other people through that? And how did you stay strong through that?
Yeah. I think, there's kind of two approaches that I have found that work well, right? One of them is a very, tactical kind of short view, right? And the other is a much sort of longer term view. And I think taking both is really helpful. I think, in the shorter term, I think it's important to ultimately remember that far and away the best clients are the ones who pay the most money. And I don't mean best financially. That part's pretty obvious, right? I mean best in terms of your interactions with them. Because paying more is an indication that that problem is sort of must solve for them. It's an indication that they value quality work. It's an indication that they're going to be, serious about the way they work with you. And all of those things are ultimately what you want in a client. I found, clients who are constantly pinching pennies just tend to be exhausting, right? They change the scope last minute. They always want, more for less. They tend to be less well informed about sort of the norms of the type of work I do. And for me, as a web developer and a UX designer, right, that means like having to handhold them through things that are, really obvious to anyone who works in the industry, even in a non-technical role, right? And if you find yourself like as a developer having to explain why designing for mobile is important, right? You're kind of in a bad place, right? People ideally should know that before you kind of start working with them. And so I think that's the first thing to remember is like ultimately those are the types of clients you want to go after. And so it's important to kind of just set what your non-negotiables are, right? And so, there's all sorts of pricing theory we can get into, but I think at a bare minimum, one of your guides should be just what your costs are, right? And as a freelancer, that's like, how much do you need to make in order to, pay rent or pay your mortgage and pay for healthcare, put food on the table, save for retirement, right? Take a vacation every now and then, right? And so like at a bare minimum, right, you should have that as your threshold and say like, I'm not going to do any work unless it pays, more than my effective hourly rate of X, right? And so I think that's the kind of the tactical piece in terms of like staying strong. I think the longer term piece is to, accept that like your first client is probably not going to be your most profitable. Your second client probably won't either. But you have the opportunity to trade up clients as you go. And that I think has been one of the things that's helped me to get to where I am today is by, basically locking in relationships with clients in the form of retainer agreements and then, letting them run their course and ultimately, replacing, the clients who tended to be the least good fit with somebody who is at the other end of the spectrum and was a client who was a better fit than any of my other clients.
Absolutely. We love, love, love those clients who appreciate the skill set, who understand it, and who can ultimately it's a mutual relationship, because it's not just about who's going to pay me the most. It's like who's going to understand what's needed and work the best with me. So it's not necessarily who's going to divvy up the money. It's more than that when you're building relationships that actually are going to be long-term sustainable, like relationships that you want to have and work with regularly. So if you wanted to leave anybody with one last little nugget of what to expect in the freelance world, challenges, how you build that base, anything that you want to say to leave our audience with.
Yeah, I think, the one thing we didn't touch on is kind of the sales process. And I think ultimately the thing that I found to be most important there is not what you'd think, right? It's not persuading your clients to work with you or anything like that. It's more setting clear expectations with them so that you set yourself up for success during the course of the project. And so you make sure that they're going to be happy, because happy clients buy again, they refer other work. And more than anything else, that tends to be just making sure that you are, setting clear expectations. This is what you're going to get. This is when you're going to get it. This is what I need from you in order to deliver that. And I think if you do that, you're going to have happy clients. They're going to, send more business your way, and freelancing can be a fantastic business.
I love that. That's so important to remember when you're working with anybody, to set those clear expectations and those boundaries and make it clear so that you're not over promising or under promising. That's big.
Yes. So tell the audience how they can get a hold of you, where they can reach you.
Yeah. So you can find me at freelancegps.com. I've got a free course there that covers step by step the ins and outs of everything that we just talked about, how to meet clients through one-on-one conversations, what to say, what to ask, how to close the deal, all of that kind of stuff. You can also find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. And I'm happy to chat with any of you. I give away a free kind of hour-long strategy session as well. So if you're thinking about freelancing and you're not sure where to start, or you already have a freelance business and you want some help growing it, I'd love to chat.
Love that. And of course, that'll all be in our show notes.
Absolutely. And I can already think of some people I'm going to be sending your way
Same.
before this even airs. So hopefully they'll come your way very soon. Thank you so much for enlightening us on the freelance world. We absolutely loved having you on the show today.
Awesome. Thank you. I love being here.
Yes.
Per usual, everyone, if you feel like you know somebody who could benefit from Tim's knowledge, please send them towards this podcast and towards Tim so we can expand the world of freelance market. We would love to share that knowledge. So if you know anybody who is in that sphere or wanting to be, send them our way or Tim's way. Please leave us all the likes, shares, comments, subscribes that you can.
Absolutely. So until next time,
get after it.
All right, everyone, it's not enough to just listen.
Now you've got to put it into action.
We are so excited to see what you do next.
If you enjoyed our show, please leave us a review on iTunes.
And to find out more about what we're doing, visit us at thepursuitofbadasserie.com.